Welcome to this unit on repeat action and variables, part of Workato University's Fundamentals course. Integrating business applications often involve working with a batch of records or list of items, where you may need to repeat a set of actions for every item in a list. For example, you might be importing a list of companies to your business application and would like to execute certain workflows for every company imported, such as checking which region they are based in and notifying your colleagues in the respective regional offices. To iterate a set of actions through every item in a list, you can do so using the repeat action. It allows you to execute a set of actions for every item in a list. This functions similarly to the for each loop concept in programming. To do so in the platform, click on the plus sign and select Repeat Action. You will be prompted to specify the input list for processing, as well as configure the actions to be repeated. To illustrate how it works, let's take a look at a sample recipe. In this workflow, the input list has been specified as a list of accounts retrieved from the application, Salesforce, while the set of actions, search and create the organization, will be repeated for every account in the list. Upon iterating through all items in the list, it will execute the next steps in the recipe. To configure the repeat action, first specify the input list field, which only accepts list item data pills. To identify list type data pills, look for this icon in the app data, which contains a few horizontal lines. This indicates that the particular object contains a list of items. Next, when configuring the actions to be repeated, such as searching for organization, you should always use the data pills from the for each step. This ensures that every item in the list is processed. Using the data pills directly from the list will result in only the values of the first item being retrieved. However, you can't exactly use the repeat action if you do not have a list item. What if you just want to repeat an action for a specific number of times? To achieve this, you can make use of the built-in utility, Lists by Workato, and configure the action Create Repeat Helper List. This allows you to create a list of a specified size for the duration of a job, which can be used with the repeat action. Take, for example, in this recipe, using the Create Repeat Helper List action. A list will be created with the list's size specified as 5. After this, in the following repeat action, the list data pill from the output of the repeat helper list created can then be specified as the input list. By doing so, in this repeat action, the job will run through the action of adding a new row in Google Sheets for a total of 5 times, as specified by the size of the repeat helper list created. To create a repeat helper list, add an action and search for Lists by Workato before selecting Create Repeat Helper List as the action. You will then specify the size of the list depending on how many times you want the action to be repeated. When specifying the input list, be sure to use the list data pill from the output of the Create Repeat Helper List step for your input list. You can then configure the actions to be repeated. In the process of building your recipe, you can also make use of the Workato variable to store data value. To do so, you can make use of the built-in utility, Variables by Workato, to create and update variables that are usable in a single recipe. A variable in Workato is a user-declared data pill that contains a data value. These are different from a standard data pill in that your declared variables are mutable, where the value of the variable can be changed within a recipe. The lifetime of a variable is the duration of a single job, and no mechanism can access this across different jobs. Workato variables are typed. You will have to first declare it using the Create Variable action and update it using the Update Variable action. To create a variable, add an action and search for Variables by Workato before selecting Create Variable. Give a name to your variable, such as item_count, and select the variable type. It should match the data type that it will be used for. Lastly, you can specify the default value of the variable. When this is left blank, the default value is null. Once this is done, the variable created will be available as a data pill for use in your recipe. To update the variable, add an action to search for Variables by Workato and choose the Update Variable action. You can then choose the variable that you want to update from the existing variables, such as the variables item_count that we have created earlier on. Do note that you can only update variables managed by the built-in utility, Variables by Workato. Once done, you may then configure the new value of the variable. Do note that this action does not generate a data pill. To call your declared variable, use the output of the create variable step. Now let us apply what we have learned to a simple scenario. In this scenario, John has been asked to build a recipe that can sum from 1 to 100 iteratively. How can he achieve this? To do so, John can make use of the repeat action. Specifically, he can first use a scheduler trigger to determine when the recipe should be executed. Next, he can create an integer type variable to keep track of the sum as well as create a list size of 100 to perform the sum operation on the variable 1 to 100 iteratively. Then he can make use of the repeat action to update the variable by adding a new integer iteratively, from 1 to 100. Finally, he can then log a message with the final output, which should give him the answer 5050. We will now look at how to do this exactly on the Workato platform, and you can try building the same recipe thereafter. Before creating your recipe, go to the personal folder that you have created to ensure that the recipe will be created in the folder. Next, click on Create a new recipe, where you will be guided to configure your trigger. As we are using a scheduler trigger, let's select Scheduler by Workato as the application and New Schedule Event as the trigger event. Then, we will leave the interval as 5 minutes and the date and time to start the recipe blank. Next, we will need to create an integer type variable to keep track of the sum. Let us search for Variables by Workato as the application and select Create Variable as the action. Then, let's name this variable as total_count and select integer as the variable type for our sum operation. We will then set the default value for the variable to be 0. After clicking on Finish, let us create a list of size 100 so we can let perform the sum operation on the variable from 1 to 100 iteratively. Click on the plus icon and select Action in an app. Now, search for Lists by Workato as the application and select Create Repeat Helper List as the action. Here, let us set the list size as 100. Now, let's click on the plus icon and select Repeat Action. In the Input List field, let's drag and drop the list data pill from the Step 3 output. Now, we can iteratively perform a sum operation 100 times, from 1 to 100. Let's click on the next action to configure the sum operation. Search for Variables by Workato and select Update Variable as the action. Here, select the variable name that we will be updating, Total Count Step 1. Next, in the Value field, switch over to Formula mode. We will map the sequence number data pill from the ForEach output. Type plus and then map the total count data pill from the Step 2 output, where the variable is created. Now let's take a look at what this formula does. When the variable is updated for the first time, the sequence number that is 1 will be added to the variable, total count, which we have set to the default value as 0. The variable will then be updated to 1. When this action is repeated, the next sequence number that is 2 will be added to the variable total count, and the variable will then be updated to 3. This will then be iterated till 100 times. Finally, let's log a message to find out the output. Click on the plus icon and select Action in an app. Here, search for the app, Logger by Workato, and leave Log Message as the action. When specifying the message, click on Remove Suggestions if there are predefined mappings that have been suggested. To specify the message, click on Add Optional Fields and select Message. Thereafter, map the total count data pill from Step 2 output into the input field for message. Once completed, click on Test Recipe, which will pick up one trigger event to run and will stop thereafter. To check the final output, click on the job and scroll down to the Log Message to Output step. You will notice that the message logged is 5050, which is the iterative summation from 1 to 100. Now, have a go creating the same recipe. This brings us to the end of this unit.